to see everybody here. My name is Ed Hermes, president of the Osborne School District Governing Board. We will start with the Pledge of Allegiance, and if everybody could just stand up, I'll go ahead and lead. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And next I will do our land acknowledgement statement. Arizona is home to 22 tribal nations. The Osborne School District is situated on the homelands of the Acamel, O'odham, and Peepash people. Osborne School District recognizes the original inhabitants of these lands and recognizes they still reside throughout the city of Phoenix. We recognize their wisdom, impact, and generosity towards us. Osborne School District is surrounded by the original Salt River canals that were constructed by the ancestral Sonoran desert people, the Hohokam. These canals created a livelihood for the people and are still in use today. We acknowledge the modern indigenous people that inhabit this area, as well as their Sonoran desert ancestors, the Hohokam. Moving on, we don't have any celebrations
I've
today.
got a couple announcements.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
go ahead.
The first announcement, you've seen a lot about it on our social media, and you're going to have a chance to actually take some action during our consent agenda related to some travel by administrators. But I like to call attention to when there's wonderful things happening either in the district or we have teachers or school leaders that are participating in something that is that brings lots of attention to our community. And so there's Corey right there. We are super, super excited. And you saw the social media announcements about all 6 of Osborne schools being labeled in America's Healthiest Schools by the Alliance for a Healthier Generation. This is recognizing our commitment to implementing local wellness plans and improving access to food and nutrition. So that is super exciting. Corey and Teresa Matza are going to be representing us at a conference upcoming where they're going to receive, they'll be receiving that award.
Great job.
And we can keep the celebrations going for our child nutrition department. We've got something super, super cool coming up. I remember the first time I heard about the blue zones, you know, this idea of there are zones around the world where people live longer. And they look into like health and nutrition reasons as to why that longevity exists. And so Osborne's Child Nutrition is going to be hosting a Blue Zone series. The first night of that is coming up next week. If you had the opportunity to use the QR code on our social media to get a ticket to that event, fantastic. If not, it's sold out already. But there will be 4 more series coming up. This first installation is on Okinawa, Japan. So just reading from their posting, that session is going to delve into lifestyle, nutrition, and feature culinary delights from Okinawa. Teresa, our registered dietitian and chef, is going to be hosting that night, and 5-part series. So we're looking forward to the future iterations of that. But this is going to be so neat. My anticipation, I told Corey, you know, he's limiting it because, you know, it's in the Garden Cafe, but I wouldn't be surprised if we need the entire Encanto Clarendon cafeteria. By the end of it, I anticipate that word out on the street and demand for being part of such a cool and innovative thing, word's going to spread. You know, we celebrate our schools all the time, but, you know, our child nutrition department is the best, and this is another example of why that is so. So we can clap for that too.
Woo.
We also have the opportunity to celebrate when folks are out speaking about some amazing things. Felipe Carranza is going to be presenting at the Association of Latino Administrators and Superintendents National Education Summit. He's going to be presenting with Patty Cruz and Dr. Tanae Hudgens about the work of leadership teams that we've been doing in partnership here between Osborne and NIET. Tanae and Patty are Vice President and Regional Director of NIET. So that's fantastic that Felipe is going to be making that presentation, as well as taking part in an international research and practice conference through the International Successful School Principals Project through NAU and the ISSPP. So lots of amazing opportunities for presentations coming up that you'll have an opportunity to approve very soon. In fact, I think now.
Wonderful.
That's it for celebrations for the night.
Okay, wonderful. Yeah, clap some more. That's great. And look forward to next month having the kids back and the celebrations at our schools. Moving on to our consent agenda. Any questions on any items or need to take anything off of a consent agenda? I just had one question. It is related to item M, which is the school facilities oversight board capital plan. And if you're following along at home, it's item page 176 of the packet. It was just a one-page plan, and it didn't say a whole lot, at least in my maybe unskilled eyes. I know it has some projections about enrollment, but there weren't any items under locally funded project list. So I just was curious about, is this typically how kind of short these plans are?
So if you looked up at L, you can see that, things that are coming to you through the SFD, you get, much more elaborate, but I'll let Colleen go on ahead and speak to this.
Thanks, Colleen.
Good evening.
Yeah, good evening.
Yes, so typically there's different pieces in that capital project that aren't applicable to us, such as the tuition in and out students, the vacant land component of that, and then those locally funded projects, that's once you have identified locally funded projects that then meet that detail that they're asking for. So we don't quite know yet what some of those local funded projects are going to be as far as gross square footage, replacement space, estimated start date and end date of construction project periods. So I would imagine that this time next year when the board's approving the FY26 capital plan, then we'll have more of those already in the works or already mapped out so that then we can populate a little bit more. You may or may not remember that when we did, this is a required plan component of any elections that go out for capital funding. So when we were out in front of our voters last November, this plan was included, and it's often blank. It was blank when it went out in the voter information pamphlet last year. The only thing that's really applicable to us at this point is those enrollment projections, and the SFD relies on those to determine if we're eligible for their funding of any new spaces.
Like if we have hypergrowth type of
Yes.
things.
Yeah.
Understood.
So that's really the most important piece of this that they look at to determine if they're going to fund projects for like new schools.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you so much. Hearing no other questions, I will take a motion on the approval for the consent agenda.
I move to approve the consent agenda.
Do a second?
I second it.
All in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed say nay. Hearing none, it does pass. Moving on to our next item is the call to the public. Do we have anybody signed up for call to the public?
No.
Nobody today? Okay. And then I'm going to go ahead and just move one item just a little earlier, just because we've got some folks here for this, and then our friends at H2 are more than welcome to stay for the rest of the meeting. But I'm going to move the bond update a little earlier, and therefore, if you need to catch dinner tonight, we'll get you out in time for that. So if we could just call up our friends over at H2 for bond update.
And as Paul's stepping forward, Brendan, we're moving down to item 8D, which is the bond update. So I'm not sure if you have any visuals to present for that.
Good to see you, Paul.
Thank you. Thank you. Governing Board President, Governing Board members, Dr. Robert. Thank you for the opportunity to present an update to you this evening on your bond program. Generally going to cover two different parts. One, kind of where we are currently, and then some of the future parts of the bond that we've been doing some planning on. So the first part, first few, well, it's not slides, the first part in your handout is,
We can hold on and wait, if you want to wait for the visuals to get up there.
okay, whatever.
I know I threw you a curveball by putting you a little sooner.
Okay.
If you need a minute, Brendan, I can move on to another item and come back. Yeah, we're trying to look at that works. That works. Paul, we'll bring you back up here in a little bit.
Okay,
So I'm gonna I'm gonna move on to administrative reports, and then we'll come back to Paul. Are there any items or questions on the administrative reports? Okay, hearing none, moving on to our, I'm coming back to OEA. Didn't forget about you guys, okay? I'm coming back to you after bond, okay? I love you guys. I'm not forgetting about you. I know you were like, wait, what about us? What about us? I know. I'm coming back to you. I know they're trying to get the slides up.
Yeah, we can move on to the action.
Yeah, we're going to move on to action items. And our first item on the action items is the election of a board clerk. The board clerk position is vacant right now. We need to elect a new board clerk.
And just for everybody's sake out there, this is to get us from September through December. Board reconstitution happens in January, but this is to finish out this current term that runs through December.
Yep, and some districts call him vice president, some say clerk, but the duties of course, of clerk are to step in when the president's not here, and to serve out the other clerk duties like taking minutes and things of that nature. So with that, I'd like to nominate Board Member Leanne Greenberg for clerk. Do I have a second?
I second that.
Any discussion? Any other nominations? Board Member Greenberg, do you accept the nomination?
I do.
Wonderful. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Hearing none, it does pass. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah. Great.
Let's change out that nameplate. Do we have the nameplate?
Yeah,
Let's
do you-
make this official during
You
the
got a
meeting.
nameplate?
Yeah.
You gotta it's in the back somewhere.
There it is.
All right. Go.
Thank you.
And moving on, as Lisa does that, to our next action item, which is approval of the second reading of the ASBA policy revisions to those policies listed therein. This is a second reading. We've seen these before, but
Yep, second reading. The only thing that, as a reminder, approval of this is approving not necessarily that list, but approving my recommendations that are listed. So in my recommendations, there's one that has to do with like a instructional instruction in the classroom, and also relates to like high school policy. IKF relates to high school graduation. So we're approving IHA, which is related to curriculum, not approving IKF. But your motion to approve the second reading is a motion to approve the recommendations made and listed in the board packet.
any questions on any of these policies? Hearing none, I'll take a motion.
I'll move to approve.
Any second?
I'll second it.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, any opposed, say nay. Hearing none, it does pass. Okay. And then our last action item, we're going to come back to that one after executive session. So I'm going to move back to, and Brendan, don't let me put you on the spot, buddy, but are we
All good.
Are we good for a bond update?
Yes.
All right, perfect. Let's go move to our bond update, and then after that is going to be, just so everybody knows, it's going to be our board presentation from OEA. Go ahead, Paul.
Okay, thank you again. So the first part tonight will be current projects, an update on those, some of which you heard about last update, last month. And then we'll get into some of the bond planning, overall bond planning efforts. The first slide. So these projects are ones that we're working on right now. The Solano site circulation project, which was the student parent pickup drop-off point, that was completed over the summer. And working with the principal on the second part of that project, which involves student circulation. So it's on campus, in and out of the cafeteria area and the main walk-in entry. So because of exiting requirements, work is necessary to coordinate with the State Fire Marshal's office to make sure we're compliant with building codes. So that project is ongoing. Procurements were just completed, and a purchase order was issued to a roofing consultant to basically do a field investigation of all of the district schools, the roofing, and they will complete a report. They will do their field work over fall break, ultimately resulting in a report, which I'll talk about a little bit later. It will, a lot of that work ends up going for hopefully funding from SFD, from School Facilities Division. So that's the goal on that. So Montecito renovations, we've gotten kicked off with the architect. We did a really good first walk of the facility with superintendent and the architect. I would anticipate that we complete fee negotiation and issue them a PO to get started on design within the next couple weeks, if not next week. And essentially, the project starts with a programming phase. There's multiple phases that they will go through, and the programming phase is really gathering information and gathering a lot of input from stakeholders involved in that project. I'll talk a little bit more about it in the future planning, but that would include the community and district staff and stakeholders, that parents and pretty much everybody that's going to have a part in that project in that school. Playgrounds and shade structures. The important point here is probably the last bullet point about grant submittals. So Elizabeth with H2 is working with the district and some playground vendors and hoping that we can get some pretty good sized grants from them. So ultimately, funding from the School Facilities Division or these types of grants, it allows your bond dollars to go much further and do other projects. So that should be, we should have an understanding on those grant submittals towards the end of this month, and then work on those can be planned out.
Paul, can I hop in here real quickly just to say, this is something that I really appreciate about H2. We could be done with some of these playground pieces. Could have done it during the summer and just paid that money right out, at the front. But Elizabeth is really aware of a lot of these grants that are out there, and so she's taken the time to research grants, apply for them so that we can stretch our dollars. So this is really just a good example of going slow so that to be able to go farther with, in terms of dollars. So thank you for that.
Before we move on, can I just ask about the Solano cafeteria? Can you kind of go through that first part? What is being done right now with Solano and the cafeteria and student circulation?
Yes, so ultimately, there's a large renovation plan, but this is strictly to, working with the principal.
Okay.
To create a kind of a secure pathway for students out and away from the front entry that's separated by fence lines.
Okay.
So that's this. It's a small piece of the project.
Thank you.
that we started. Yep.
Is that walkway, is that through the park?
No, it's not. That's a different discussion. This is actually up front, out of the cafeteria,
Okay,
and to that main walkway that goes into the school grounds.
got it.
And if you're imagining Solano in the front, that, where the covered parking is, that long stretch, and you go around, and that's where, like the orange wall was painted that has Solano Elementary. As you go down to that, that's where you get to the front office. And then beyond that, that's where like the pack pickup, that's where the cafeteria is, where that space is. So a couple different things. Paul's referring to a little bit farther down along that space.
Right. Okay, next slide. Okay, to finish with this first portion, essentially, we'll get into the overall bond planning in a second. There is, not only on the roofing, but quite a few other items that have been identified by the district as needs, particularly with mechanical equipment and some plumbing issues that we're going to try to get resolved. Those are the types of things that School Facilities Board will entertain funding for. So that process, again, Elizabeth's working pretty closely with your Director of Maintenance on that coordination. And so we're hoping to get a lot of that submitted, and then addressed by the School Facilities Division. Engineering evaluations of electrical systems, that's really initially an analysis by a professional electrical engineer to look, it was identified as a item by district staff, and so they will go to each district facility and really do a thorough investigation of electrical systems and report back on the condition. Same thing with HVAC there, and plumbing repairs and replacements. Those are all systems within the district that have been identified for repairs. Playground equipment repairs, there are some repairs and replacements in addition to full new adds, which are ongoing right now, and some of those have been completed. A good example of that is moving down completed work is the playgrounds at Solano, and it's that web climber that has been replaced. So the other work that was going on over the summer, which, as I said, I think you heard about last month, is completed, the Solano Preschool Restroom Addition, and the half of site circulations that deals with the drive for parent pickup drop-off. So one other thing that we did do in this past month is we had a very excellent walk with the Director of Child Nutrition, and we visited all of the schools. We took, our first initial look at kitchen facilities and cafeterias, and that was both SPS Plus and H2 groups. So it was a good initial look at those facilities. As we move to the next slide, I just wanted to, we'll get into the planning here in a second, but I wanted to mention it. We've really engaged pretty significantly with district staff, fantastic to work with. We have regular weekly meetings with administrative staff. We have regular weekly meetings with Director of Maintenance. And as I said, we worked with Child Nutrition to walk through, and I think we're going to arrange a meeting with the Director of IT here in the next week or two to talk about your technology piece of the bond. So,
Paul, I remember talking a little bit, it's been a while, but before the bond passed and we're looking at different things at different schools, talking a bit about screening at 7th Street. I remember that being a low priority, at least on that committee. What's the thought process of a screening?
I'm not 100% sure I have an answer on that. These were line items that are in the assigned, for Montecito project. So what we're doing is we've put everything under the umbrella of the renovation project, but the next thing to really do is to dig deep into the scope of these and understand. I know that you have, the parking situation over there up against 7th Avenue, and I believe it is
Street, yeah.
the wrought iron fencing along 7th. So it's something that we'll talk to district and to school administration to really get a good handle on what the thought is.
Yeah, I don't love that, just one person's opinion, I don't love that idea of like a wrought iron fence on 7th Streit and kind of that look of it. trees and shading and things like that, a little bit more welcoming, bring people in. That's just kind of what I had conveyed a year ago when we were going through that committee process. And I know there's a lot of process still yet to go through, so I just want to make sure I get that voice out
Well, I
there.
think when he says the wrought iron fencing, he's talking about what's already there.
Oh,
Yeah, we've already got, like, when you're driving up 7th Street, what separates the sidewalk of 7th Street from the parking lot at Montecito, that's
Oh,
not
yeah,
chain
you're-
link fence.
that's wrought iron fence
Yeah,
right
yeah.
now.
Mhm.
Got it. Got it. Cool.
So all of that will be looked at as
Okay.
part of the scope development. This is a sizable project, and it will go through a programming phase where scope is talked about, and then schematic design, design development. The architect will work through those phases as well. So there's a lot of input before they even start doing their construction documents. So.
Sounds great.
So this begins the next couple slides about the planning process that we have gotten into over the last about 45 days, 60 days. And essentially, just on the Montecito slide, the first one, what we've done is we've taken the bond.
Hey, Brennan, can you go back one slide to Montecito? There we go. Thank you.
Thank you. So just to kind of put a little framework around it, the bond is a $100 million bond. It's a multi-bond sales. So what we've done is taken those amounts and created what we're calling packages. They generally correlate with the bond sales, but there is some overlap based on funding and the scope of work of the items. So in the first package, everything that we've gone over to this point, as well as everything we're going to see that's identified as package 1, is currently within the first bond sale. That's what we're working on. So the big project in package 1, of course, is Montecito Community School. And there's initial criteria that's been talked about is for the architect, SPS Plus, to consider and use Montessori school design principles. So that will be another aspect of this project that gets reviewed and talked about as we go through to make sure that that criteria is included. So as I mentioned, there's a number of bullet points here. These are items that were identified for that school. And essentially what we will do is we will create a package for this school, which will be one design from the architect, one set of design documents, and we will go out to a single contractor ultimately for this project. So, next slide. So all of the schools are actually being touched in package 1. So there's a little bit of the work that's happening. In Canto, it's planned to have, and again, this is part of what's being reviewed right now for potential grant, but what's being discussed and looked at is a pretty sizable play structure, playground area. And it would basically be on the north side of the soccer field, the field that's out just north of Osborne. So it would be on the north side of that field and almost run continuously east-west is what the discussions are right now.
Would that replace the current large play structure, or would that be in addition to it?
I believe, now Elizabeth's working on it from Grant, but I believe that it is new.
Oh, cool.
As well as where you kind of wrap the corner there where the drive is, doing some shade sales. So trying to maximize shade availability as well.
Right.
So a lot of work that will be happening at the schools is related to mechanical systems, to some plumbing stuff, and also roof replacements. The Longview elevator, Montecito has an elevator as well that is included as replacement. So we're looking to try to group those into that same package so that they happen simultaneously. Okay, so there's one more slide on package one.
Can you go back? I have a question about that. What is, for Longview, replace existing HW loop?
Oh, I'm sorry. That stands for hot water loop.
Okay.
Sorry, unfortunately, our industry has a lot of acronyms, and
In education, we do
Ours
too.
too.
Yeah.
Stick around, you'll hear some.
I know. So, okay, this is the last slide related to package one, but there's a lot of work that was identified to happen across all the schools or certain specific schools that had these types of issues. So you can see there's a lot of work on the systems, life cycle project evaluation. That will be a process where professionals will look at that and will assess. I believe the district has a life cycle report from a past bond or past year, so that's a starting point for us to look at that. Again, the electrical systems. The two items identified, flexible classroom furnishings and kitchen equipment updates. Those are large dollar amounts that right now they're spread out over a couple of bond sales. And that's kind of the nature of trying to get a lot of work into each one of these pools, 30 million for package one, 35 million for package two, and that type of thing. There is a lot of technology upgrades included in the first package. A lot of those, the IT director will do directly with technology equipment. We would assist as needed on the phone system upgrades, the audio, video replacements, and marquee replacements, because there's a good chance that those will require other subcontractors than technology vendors to do patching, repairs, that type of stuff. There is a small project plan for the governing board room, ADA governing board improvements.
Yeah,
So-
and that's something that we had talked about before, like with the podium, making sure that we have ADA accessible presentation. We had talked about using, getting that work done before, and we got some quotes on it. It's a little expensive, so we decided to leverage bond dollars, delay that project and leverage bond dollars to do that.
Okay, so that's essentially what we have laid out for package one. And next slide shows future bond sales. Now, these are, of course, anticipated. They've not occurred yet. So, but laying that out, it's important to really lay out the entire bond program so that even if it is ballpark estimates for costs and things like that, one of the big things that we want to make sure is you don't run out of money at like in year 28 to 30 when you're working on performing arts center or something like that. So essentially, these future bond packages, the first one will have a little more substantial renovations at Clarendon and Canto and Osborne. More of the HVAC and roofing. One of the larger components to this sale will be the new child nutrition facility. So that will involve, again, a lot of interaction with Director of Child Nutrition and stakeholders for that project as well. And then package 3 is the last big one. And that would include the Performing Arts Center as the kind of the keynote project in that package. 4 is a small amount, which is primarily allocated right now to technology upgrades. And again, that projects out to 2030 and 2032. So that ends the update. And again, thank you, and be happy to answer any other questions.
Wonderful. Any questions for Paul?
I have a question. If we could go back to the slide that was talking about the existing things that we're doing right now. One more, I think it is. Yeah. So you discussed that the package number 1 is going to touch all of the schools, but I didn't see anything about Clarendon. Do you know specifically what we're doing with Clarendon on that first package?
Yeah, so Clarendon is part of, some of the scope described on the next slide,
Okay.
the district-wide, will happen at Clarendon.
Okay.
So there is some larger components as we move into package 2
Okay.
for Clarendon, but there will be some work that gets grouped in for Clarendon with some of the other schools under district-wide projects.
Great, thank you.
Paul, just a couple of comments and maybe a question in there. The shading is so important, so I'm really excited that looking at grants of how to get more shading, and hopefully that whatever monies are kind of saved by getting grants, we can still use that money for even more shading. We need so much more shade. Unfortunately, the world's getting warmer, hotter. Phoenix is getting hotter, and the kids really feel it. I mean, I just know my kids probably for most of August couldn't go outside for recess, and so we've got to adapt. And the best way we can do that, at least that I know how, is more shade. Trees, shade sails. Got to not just double down on that, triple down on more shade. I got a call from a parent who said that they walked their kid into school and burned themselves on the drinking fountain because it was so hot and there was no shade. And it's just like, we do whatever we can to stop the warming, but as a school, we got to just adapt. So really appreciate it. I'm sure you're hearing that a lot of the similar things that you're doing, your walks and designs with the principals, but it's so imperative that we just maximize shade. You mentioned ADA improvements. I mean, something I hear about as well, and this is, I guess, outside of the bond update, but you're here anyway, so I'll ask you. This is more of adjacent ways funding that a lot of districts do to improve their adjacent ways. The sidewalk right out here on Osborne Road, take a look at it when you head out today. It is not ADA compliant. It is impossible if you're in a wheelchair to get through that sidewalk, or if you're pushing a stroller. There's a lot of obstructions.
Okay.
Love to look at how we can use our adjacent ways funding, a different pot of money, to fix those sidewalks. So we can, somebody who's in a pushing a stroller, as happens a lot at our schools, or in a wheelchair who's trying to access our district office or our schools here along Osborne Road, can get through on the sidewalks. So would love, whatever the correct channels are, the process is to look at that and how we can tap into that money to fix those sidewalks.
Okay, and those are public sidewalks, I believe, right?
Yes, they're public sidewalks, but inaccessible. I mean, you'll see, come out when you leave, look to your left, you'll see a big pole next to a big, I don't know what it is, SRP thing, where you got about this much space to try to get through, to navigate. You got to be pretty skinny to use that sidewalk. And so anyone in a wheelchair or pushing a stroller, luckily we have those bike lanes there, so it's not quite as treacherous, but it's still treacherous to try to use those sidewalks. And so I know it would take some work and some effort to make those ADA compliant. Presumably you'd have to make the sidewalk wider to the north, and move that fence line or something like that. But I just think that being ADA compliant and making it more walkable area for our kids, I think it's worth it. So I'd love to look into that.
Okay, sounds good.
I was also hoping that when we're talking about like the play structures and, other things that our kids are using, that we're looking at, how do we make them wheelchair accessible, add more like sensory components, those kind of things, so that we're, really making those playgrounds fit for everyone that we serve. And then I was also wondering, and this might be a Dr. Robert question, how are we involving like student voice on things like play structure, shade, those kind of things? And I'll give just an example. So in a previous district that I worked in, the district had decided they were going to put a shade structure in a certain area. And they actually took it back to the students, and the students were like, well, we don't hang out in that area. Like, we actually want the shade structure here. And so, I think having those conversations with our kids is really helpful so we're not spending money on something that they're not going to use.
It's a great point. And our schools, luckily, I mean, have very robust student councils, I think, at all of our schools, and with really smart kids. And so it's a great point.
And we will engage our kids, and I appreciate you bringing that up, as well as the ADA components. Looking at the playgrounds, we've already had some discussions about that, and that's in our process and in our plans.
Thanks, Paul. Appreciate your time. Yeah, have a good evening. Okay, without further ado, we are going to our board presentation and our Osborne Education Association. It's wonderful to have you here. I'll give you guys the floor.
Hello,
Hello.
everyone. I'm just gonna let everyone come in. Yes. Hello, President Hermes, members of the board, Superintendent Robert. We're here tonight to talk about Osborne Education Association, our Osborne staff union. A lot of you are familiar with the union structure because you sit in them. But just for people listening and are looking for more information, as OEA, we are the local district association that is a part of Arizona Education Association, as well as the National Education Association, which is one of the largest labor unions in the country. So today we're just going to share a little bit about some of our goals for this year, as well as some of the work that we're doing. But I want to take some time to introduce some of our leaders, some familiar faces, some new, and then some folks who unfortunately couldn't be here tonight. So if Brendan, if you could go to the next slide, and then we'll just go down the line and introduce ourselves and the position that we have in OEA and the position we have in the district. So I'm Storm Gerlach, I'm the president of OEA, and I am the librarian at Encanto.
Hi, I'm Gloria Markov. I am Encanto site rep, and I am resource in Encanto.
Wonderful.
Hello, I'm Tara Lao Garcia. I am the site representative, co-site representative at Longview, along with my friend Dorinda, and I am a first grade teacher at Longview.
Alex Parker, I am co-site rep at Encanto, and I teach second grade dual.
Dorinda Montoya, and I'm co-representative at Longview. I'm the librarian along with Tara.
And then we do have some folks that were unfortunately not able to make it tonight. So Hilda Palache is our treasurer, Sammy Wright is our secretary, Luis Valencia is our membership chair, Jorge Meza is our site representative at Clarendon, and that's everyone. All right, let me go ahead and pass it to Dorinda.
All right. We have a mission, and our OEA mission is to inform, empower, and advocate for all staff in order to achieve equitable, quality working and learning conditions.
And as we've come out of COVID and we're getting together a little bit more often, we're trying to kind of switch things up a little bit with our OEA member engagement and offer some different ways to make sure we're engaged and continuing to be equitable and bring some joy as well. So we're going to try a few different things. We have our quarterly learning sessions, which are long-form meetings that are focused on topics related to employee rights, member benefits, and member input. So we're going to do several of those throughout the year. And then we'll have our bi-monthly general meetings, which are brief meetings to provide union updates and to hear member feedback. We want to stay in communication, of course, as well as take a solutions-based approach to working conditions concerns. We want to make sure that everyone has a chance to be heard and we can address those as they come up. And then to bring a little more joy, we're going to have some solidarity socials. I like the name. Every other month, members will get together to have a designated space to share and enjoy each other's company so that we can have a time to just get together as well and spread some of that that joy. Next slide, please. I'm going to go ahead and just pull up the definition here, and then Storm's going to talk a little bit more about OEA's goals for Meet and Confer. So Meet and Confer is really our big project that we're working on to try and get through and work together on. And Meet and Confer is the process in which representatives of both the union and the school district meet to present and discuss proposals for the benefit of district employees. So in this process, the employer and the union may bargain proposals down to each detail until a tentative agreement is reached. And Storm's going to talk a little bit more about OEA's specific goals for Meet and Confer.
Yes, Brendan, if you could go to the next slide. Thank you. So I shared a little bit last month during a call to the public some specific goals that OEA has. This work has kind of been going on for 2 to 3 years now. The leadership team has been engaging in different types of learning through Arizona Education Association, looking into processes that other districts use, looking into different types of Meet and Confer, and getting some advice from our peers in our surrounding districts. So through that work, we've had to do a lot of educating of ourselves. You know, not all of us, but almost all of us have spent the majority of our career in Osborne. And so we wanted to really look at a way to go through a Meet and Confer process that would allow for more voice and more input from staff, but would also still serve the needs of being in our Osborne community. So last month I shared the specific goals for this current school year related to Meet and Confer. So those are to formalize a process that can be used in future years, present and review proposals and negotiate with the district in detail, create an end product of a working agreement between the district and OEA, and provide transparency for all Osborne employees. Right now, where we're sitting in this process is that myself, Superintendent Robert, and Ms. Toscano, the Chief Operations Officer, are engaging in conversations to discuss the potential creation of a Meet and Confer process for this school year. As a leadership team, we are kind of staying and looking at what our mission is, what some of our shared agreements are in terms of what we're hoping to accomplish for members, so that we can move forward in this process in collaboration with the district.
Thank you. And then at the opening meeting this year, which a couple of you I know attended, one of the things we did to engage our members is to have them fill out cards called Union Pride cards. And so we have a few up here that you can read. I'll just read one on each slide. But obviously we have lots of different people throughout the district who are members. And so we wanted to share a few of their thoughts. The one I'm going to read on this slide is, I chose to join OEA in support of my colleagues. We are stronger together and can support each other in different ways through OEA. And there's a couple others up there if you want to take a moment to look at them, and then we'll go to the next slide. And on this slide is, again, quite a few different people within, whether classified, certified, or other areas. And the one I'll read on here is, I joined OEA to ensure my voice is heard and protected. So there's lots of different reasons that people join. We want to celebrate that. And so we encourage people to fill those out at the opening meeting. And we are going to provide a little treat. We're going to pick one person from each site and get a little gift card out there, because it's always nice to get a little something when you get recognized. And then I think we're at the end, unless someone else has anything else to add, and we're ready for it. Thank you for listening and questions.
Wonderful. Questions from the board? Go ahead, Leanne.
Not a question, but thank you all for presenting, and I hope that this becomes a regular part of our meeting.
I'll second what Board Member Greenberg said. We would love to hear from you guys. So thank you for being here.
Thank
Completely agree. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much. Hey, and I do have a question.
Yes.
Don't leave. I know you thought you'd get without a question. So just want to clarify, and I know we have a policy and it says, and we looked at it last meeting pretty in depth, and it says it was going to be the first meeting of Meet and Confer for first or second week of September. Did that meeting happen? Or are you guys talking with administration of like what that looks like? Can you just tell me kind of a little bit more detail of, especially related to as it relates to our policy?
And feel free to jump in.
No,
Dr.
you
Robert.
got it.
Dr. Robert, Ms. Toscano, and I met just to
Okay.
kind of start to have the conversation. I think, looking at this as an introductory process, this would be the first year. We want to kind of have that time to share and look at what we're looking for in format processes from the Osborne Education Association side, but also looking at what administration is looking at in terms of format. And so we have had one introductory conversation. We'll be having another conversation this week. And so we're hopeful that we'll move forward with a process that works best for both parties, so that we can kind of move forward with some goals that are specific to members.
Great. Thank you so much for the update. I really appreciate it. Thank you for fighting for our teachers and for our staff. It's very important, and it's great to hear from the members of, because you guys do such an important role of protecting our staff, and not only advocating, but for really protecting them in a world that can sometimes feel not as supportive as we try to be in this room. So thank you so much for your work.
Thank you. One thing I'll just kind of point out, something that I'm very proud of, is that our leadership team does have 3 classified leaders that sit in different roles across different campuses, and that's something that we're really proud of, is having a designated space for our classified support staff to make sure that their voices are heard, since they are about, give or take a few percentage points, but about 50% of our staff. And that's something I'm really proud of, and I'm really proud of my fellow team.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. All right. Thank you. Okay. Moving on. Next item on the agenda is information updates, student cell phones at school. Dr. Robert.
Yeah, so this was something that was asked to be a consideration for us to discuss, and it's been an ongoing conversation, not just for us, and we've talked a little bit within our administrative team, but this is a statewide, a national conversation about student cell phones at schools, and it can mean lots of different things to lots of folks. So input, lots of discussions before just jumping into policies and rules and things like that. So I just provided a little bit of background information just on what's happening in this big global conversation about cell phones in schools. And so, through the things that I've seen, there have pretty much been like 4 different ways that this has presented itself, either through district policies saying no cell phones in schools, cell phones being locked in pouches or collected, and then once you implement policy, then there's the what happens if policy isn't followed, right? So there's policy and then consequences to violation of cell phone policy. A step down from that would be more procedural. Districts, followed by all campuses requiring students to leave cell phones in backpacks from the opening to the closing bell. A local, area school district started this 3 years ago. It started off as a pilot at their middle school. This is a unified school district. They started as not as a policy, sorry, just procedurally at a middle school. They were having some issues with kids taking out cell phones in the middle of instruction and teachers having difficulty, constantly having to tell kids to get off cell phones. And so they went with what they called a way for the day, was kind of like what they entitled their procedure. Started off in one middle school, and it kind of engaged their administrative team, and now it is being used in that unified school district-wide at any of their K through 8 facilities. It's not in place in their high schools. But the gist behind that is no one's collecting anything. It's just an agreement. Cell phones are a way for the day from the minute you come in, from first bell all the way to last bell. They ask kids to put those cell phones in their backpacks, nothing on their person. When they go out to recess, no cell phones out to recess, right? It's first bell to last bell. So we've seen something like that happening locally. A next step down would be kind of school procedural, kind of making allowances for cell phones to only be used during non-instructional times. But, that's not at a district level, that's at the school level, kind of like that district that I just told you about did a couple years ago. They wanted to kind of do it as a pilot, and so one school kind of led the way. Another way, and kind of I think where we stand now, is if there are going to be kind of any school restrictions on phones, it might be by grade level, it may be situational. Something's happening on campus with an abuse of cell phones, so we're just going to come and say, hey, you know what? This has been a problem for our 4th, 5th, and 6th graders, so we're going to, restrict the usage for that grade level. It's situational, it's a school, and they're just kind of looking at answering a live situation on their campus. There was a movement last year within the legislature to make this a statewide law. So far, there's one state, Florida, where this is a statewide law, no cell phones in schools. Arizona was going to become the second. It actually went through the legislature. It passed 1613 in the Senate. It passed 3128 in the House. It started off as House Bill 2793 last year. It made it through, but Governor Hobbs vetoed that. And the main reason, I believe, I'm not going to speak for the governor, but I think the main reason behind the veto was why try and mandate something that schools are already handling, at a local level. We don't need to make this a statewide ban. Kind of getting into that local control, allowing governing boards and schools to have these conversations. Superintendent Horn was definitely in favor of that bill, and he has spoken up earlier this year in favor of seeing that come back in the next legislative session as a statewide ban. He's encouraging the legislature and the governor to pass and sign legislation there. So this was, I'm just providing a little bit of background information for you, but this was your item that you guys wanted to discuss. So with that background, I turn it over to you.
Questions? I'll open it up first before I ask a few myself.
I just noticed in the board docs that you were going to share conversations you had with Osborne principals. So I don't know if there's kind of a consensus or a feeling on where they would want to go.
Yeah, sorry. I was cutting you off. Finish. That's it. Okay. Nothing formalized in terms of, we've come to a consensus of this. But, I brought it up at the very beginning of the year. I've had individual conversations with principals. I know that there was phones being used on one campus for filming events happening. And then, you get into filming and then posting and all of that kind of stuff. And so, we kind of clamped down on that campus and stopped that nonsense from happening. It's a disruption. That's a disruption to the educational flow of things happening to the entire school campus. So, right now we're in a position of addressing things kind of individually. I know that some feedback that I've gotten from parents, I've heard from parents like, hey, this would be a good thing. We want kids interacting more. So instead of bringing your cell phone out, you're going to be more playful. That's part of what came out of the district, that has instituted this away for the day. What they've seen is when their kids are out on the playground, they're all talking to one another because they have no option but to do that. On the other side, there are some parents that are very concerned about limitations on cell phones because they feel more secure with their kids for safety reasons. As a dad who lived, at one point when my kids were younger, I lived on Missouri, and my boys rode their skateboards from, our house on Missouri down to Clarendon's. That's a, 2-mile skateboard ride in the morning through the neighborhood. I wanted to know that they were there safely, and that they got home safely. So that's when they had their first cell phone, brought to school as a little burner phone. No, what do we call these? No iPhones or anything like that. Much to the ridicule that they got at school for their little phone. But that was a safety thing, right? Now, they didn't need it during the day, and I actually told them, this is not to be pulled out, no texting, nothing like that during the day. But a lot of parents feel a need for safety and security with their kids having cell phones. What happened when we were in school? If you as a parent had a concern, you called the front office, right? And quite frankly, if we had an emergency situation happening in the school and we're running a procedure, I don't want things that are going to be communicating ideas outside of the control of those of us responsible for that. I don't want, if there were, God forbid, any type of situation where we don't need attention called and cell phone beeping calls attention to a room, right? We don't need that type of thing if we're looking at silence. So not to mention that could be used and not on the person giving instruction during an emergency. So as much as there are parental concerns about safety and having cell phones, there are just as many concerns that the cell phones are standing in the way of some safe procedures on campus. So this is one of those, I understand the arguments as a parent, and I understand the sides that may be brought up as a teacher, and I understand, well, sympathetically, there were no phones when I was teaching, but I can empathize with that. And I understand as an administrator, any feelings you may be having about, we got this handled, like we can take care of any procedures on campus, as well as if you may have feelings of, we got to do something big to clamp down on this. So far, other than that one related incident, I haven't heard many things, but things may arise in terms of, hey, cell phones are a problem on our campus for kids. I don't know that it's that big of an issue. That's more that I look forward to engaging principals on. But I've started conversations in terms of with my superintendent's group. We did have the superintendent from that one unified district come and talk to us about what the procedure looked like, and he maintained, this isn't at a governing board level of policy. This is at a procedural, this is a school. Now, in collaboration and with full, gung-ho from the governing board and administration and folks working within the district. But it's not a policy within that district, and I think they're not wanting to move towards policy. They're comfortable with it being a district procedure that they're following within their K-8 structures.
So we don't have a Osborne policy related to cell phones right now.
We have an acceptable use policy related to usage of technology within schools, and that is associated with district technology. The policy is not written about personal technology. It is, however, there are things that we can relate back to our policies. For instance, if there is something that is being done with those cell phones that is disrupting the learning environment, then we, have, grounds to enact any types of, movements or procedures on campus utilizing our policies, but we do not have a policy related to student cell phones in schools.
It's when I was a high school teacher, I was actually in charge of for the whole high school the enforcement of the cell phone policy, and we didn't call it that, but I guess it was kind of like the away for the day type thing, and that was just those were people only had what we would guys now call burner phones. There was no smartphones back then, or they were just starting to come out, I suppose, but the kids didn't have them. And you can see how distracted it made the kids, and just within the last, I would say, 5 years, technology and just social media, it's developed in a way that is intentionally trying to kind of become addictive, I guess, for lack of a better term. And there's a strong pull, even for adults who have fully formed brains, to fight that impulse of kind of being tied to their phones maybe in an excessive amount. And so I think it's a valid concern that kids, that we keep kids in the learning environment and engaged in the learning environment, which is so much more than just kind of reading, writing, arithmetic. It is that socializing piece of it as well. And so this issue is just developing so rapidly, and we're being almost bombarded with changes in our society and technology. I mean, I would love to see more kind of engagement with our parents, especially, and maybe our community more generally, about potentially adopting a district-wide policy. Our kids are jumping from schools to schools, moving up, from Longview to OMS, or from Encanto to Clarendon to OMS, or Solano. And so, would love to, see what parents want to do. And I like the idea of showing the state, hey, state, we got this. We know how to engage on the best way on the local level with our parents in our community to develop the right policy for us. We don't need you guys to kind of write our policy from a state perspective, because we, the elected leaders of the district, are in a better position to do that. And so I think it might be the right time to engage more with our parents to potentially do a district-wide policy. That might look differently for by grade level, but doing something that's a little bit more, the result of more parent engagement. Any other questions, thoughts?
I think at this point, I mean, I would want to hear more from parents, and then also from administration, where they stand on this. The research that I've looked at, and then my own experience as a teacher, I would like to see a policy where we are saying that our phones are away for the entirety of the day. I can appreciate a kid wanting to bring, or a family wanting them to have a phone, like when they're walking home or things like that. But I think for when they're here on our campuses, I'd like to see them away for the day if we wanted to adopt that as well. Not just for the distractions that it causes during the learning process, but also there's that socialization piece. I know that there's some, school districts that have looked at, okay, they have to be away when you're in the classroom, but you can have them at recess. But I think our kids really miss out on a key part of learning how to appropriately socialize with peers when they're, stuck in their phones. What I saw as a teacher was that kids younger and younger were getting phones, and not just burner phones, but smartphones. I mean, we'd have first, second graders, and I'm sure that, some of you have experienced that have these phones, and we can't control, the choices that parents may make with giving their kids those phones, but we can, determine what that looks like in the school environment. I also have big concerns when it comes to a safety thing. God forbid something big was to happen. The last thing I would want as a teacher is my kids in their phone, panicking, texting their parents, calling their parents. Maybe that creates a situation, like you said, where we're supposed to be silent, but now we've got phones going off, or we've got kids talking on the phone, or, we've got parents, when they hear, of course, they're going to rush to the school, and things like that are going to happen. But as a teacher, I want to make sure my kids are 100% focused on what we need to do to make sure that they're safe. And it's horrible that we have to think like that, but I think that that's another piece. Again, I would want to hear from administration. I see a policy kind of maybe giving this more teeth. It's not like, hey, this principal decided this, or this teacher decided this, but rather it's the board saying collectively that we believe that all students in our schools should have their phones away. And so if there's a parent, that is, upset about it, or, even if there's a staff member that's upset about it, it comes back on us if that's, what we decided that we wanted to do. I know we have talked about this before. I'd love to start doing listening sessions with our parents. We're also looking at, developing our strategic plan. So I think that could kind of pair with that nicely, so that we're getting more of that feedback from the community. But I see more pros to going with a policy, or at least district procedures. And I would want to see it covered for all students, no matter what grade level. Just to keep the phones away for the entirety of the day.
I agree. I think that it's a huge distraction. And my personal experience comes from teaching at the high school. And my first year not knowing what to do, I kind of just let the kids do whatever. And I would catch conversations that were extremely inappropriate. And I think that I can see that if we were able to keep the cell phones away for the whole day, we would avoid some of those issues that come with it. But also the research that I found too myself, the interaction that they've seen with students having at lunchtime. I mean, I know none of us had cell phones when we were in elementary school, and it's just so different to see the kids now than relationships that we built when we were that age and able to play and not be so distracted, and have those obsessions, right? I mean, I remember it really does become an addiction. I took a cell phone away from a student last year, and she cried, and she made up some lies that I caught her in. I did not give it back to her. I called her mom to verify the information she had shared with me, and the mom verified she was lying. And so I think these are bad habits that have been built because technology just exploded and nothing has been done. I think we are at a time where it's perfect for us to start, in a way, almost training our students here to know that this is not your world, right? Like it's helpful, but it's not something that you need to be on. And once you're in high school and you have more freedom, it should also stay in your backpack. And I agree with Leanne, as you say, like, I definitely want to hear from the parents and our admin and what experiences you all are having on your campuses. But I am more than happy to take the blame of the reason why you can't use your cell phone during the school day is because of the board. So totally fine with that.
Yeah. I agree. I mean, the other thing that comes to mind, I agree with everything you said, Board Member Ramos. But the other thing I think about is I look at the suspension report, and we had many really great conversations with our principals and admin. And one of the things I've learned through those and trying to reduce the amount of kids being out of school due to suspensions is a lot of is social media driven, and that aggression or fighting that you see on your reports, that was bubbling up even kind of midday in social media. And so it's just not something that a sixth grader, seventh grader, eighth grader is ready to handle, generally speaking. And the hope would be maybe looking at tweaking that policy, changing the policy, what have you. Maybe you can cut down on some of those things, and that lead to suspensions. Any other questions? And this is an information item, but any other thoughts, questions, items before I move on?
No, but I do think that as we get into the board development and what was just mentioned about listening sessions, I think we can actually engage a little bit on that, like right now. So
Wonderful.
I just wanted to note one other thing too. I mean, there's data on increased suicide rates, particularly for girls. So that's another piece. But I think, no matter what direction we go, as a district, offering some sort of parent education or training on that, I think could really make a difference. I think that there's some parents that simply don't know the impact that cell phones have on kids, particularly our preteens. And, they're going into high school, they're going to be teenagers. Like, that is an age where their brains, like, do get very addicted to the social media. Things like Instagram, those kind of things are even more, TikTok, are even more addictive. So, no matter where we go with this, I think if we could offer some sort of parent training and guidance, that would be awesome. I would also encourage, if you have not read the book, The Anxious Generation, there's a lot of really great research on not just cell phones, but just like socialization and interactions. And I think every parent and educator should read it personally.
I think that's a great point about the parent. And as a parent of kids who are getting older every day, I mean, the best preparation I had to deal with technology was talking to our principals and saying, what should I be thinking about as a girl dad, and when is the right time? And I'm like, I get access. I'm lucky. I get access to our wonderful staff and principals and get to ask these questions and think about this stuff. And it's hard as a parent in today's world to try to figure out what is the right decision to make. And so if we can provide that gentle education for our parents and get those things out there more, and even at an early age, long before middle school. And so we start thinking about that. I think that would be a really great benefit for our parents and our community.
Fantastic.
All right, moving on. And to our board development.
Right.
Nice dovetail here.
Yes.
Dr. Robert.
So our board development has been around the book Strategic Planning for School Leaders that Leanne got hers brought to her. Wonderful. Having people take care of you like that. And so, you know, at one point I was saying maybe we should put a pause on reading and delve more into the strategic plan. But I think, you know, chapter 3 really got into the needs assessment. And that's kind of the phase that we're in now. You know, this is our strategic plan was written as a 2020 through 2025 plan. So, you know, like we're still in activation mode of our current plan, and learning more about it is fantastic. But this can be kind of like our ramp up towards, like, if we're going to be doing any, you know, what does the next 5 years look like? Now's the time to be engaging with the community. And, you know, those talking points, this conversation we just had is part of, you know, the social emotional development of children, right? And those are the types of things that we need to be thinking about when we're thinking about our schools. What do we want our schools to be for our community, for our parents, for our kids, for our staff? So I just put a couple guiding questions, perhaps. I can turn it over to any of you for leading conversation about chapter 3, but this was about needs assessment data, quantitative, qualitative data. So the questions that I posed, I had 2 there. What are some of the quantitative or qualitative pieces of information we can gather from parents in the form of a survey? Number 1, that's some of that quantitative. Well, I mean, we can get both pieces through a survey, but also what you were really getting at, Member Greenberg, about those live in-person focus group sessions. I think this fall might be a really good time for starting to plan. So what are some guiding questions you would like to see in the form of live focus group sessions that we could do during a needs assessment process? And the next step to that is, when should we get started? Because I know that you guys are going to want to be a part of engaging with our community through this process. So I'll turn it over to any of you to comment, lead, or give any feedback.
Great. Thoughts, feedback? I don't want to go first. So who would like to go first?
You don't have to stick to my questions.
Go ahead, Board Member Ford.
Just some guiding questions that I kind of wrote down as I was reflecting on this over the weekend. My first guiding question I came up with was about safety. I know that we discuss school safety all the time, but unless our students feel safe, both physically and emotionally, our students don't learn. And so guiding questions to parents about how safe their students feel, what makes their student feel safe here on our campuses, and what makes them feel not safe. And discussing safety with my own child, you know, discussing, you know, what happens when there's a lockdown. Why do we have lockdowns? Sometimes it's not an immediate threat on campus. Sometimes it's something happening in the neighborhood, and we're right in the heart of Phoenix with a lot of traffic. I thought we could have some questions about teacher quality. If we want equitable instruction, we want all of our students to have positive outcomes. And so looking at teaching staff, I think that that's the first point of contact generally for our parents is through teachers. And so questions about teachers. And then questions about communication from school. I know that I'm the kind of parent where any communication I get, I read. But what are the best ways to communicate with families? How do our families prefer we communicate with them? And then the frequency. I know that if we over communicate, it gets tuned out. But if we under communicate, then somebody thinks something's wrong. So where's that sweet balance kind of in the middle? And then I had one more question about what resources do parents need? I know that as a parent, I don't know everything about parenting. And sometimes I don't even know there are resources available to our families. And so what are those resources that parents need, asking them what do they need. Maybe we can provide things for our families. And then I was thinking in the back of my mind about special education services. So for our students with learning disabilities, how can we provide better services to them? And then actually I was looking kind of at our gifted program as well. When we identify gifted learners, we place them in our gifted clusters, right? But at least I know from my experience with my own gifted learner at home, sometimes I don't feel like he's pushed as high as he could go. And so how can we better support those parents who have neurodivergent students? Yeah,
Wonderful.
that's where I'm at.
Board Member Ramos, you want to go next?
Yeah, I would love for us to include all stakeholder groups in our listening sessions, whether it is we're all together or separately, but definitely like having student groups, staff groups, parent groups, administrative groups, however it is that we want to divide it. And then once we gather all of that information, something that I would love for us to see come out of the next strategic plan is for us to have some like solid, concrete, dare I say, SMART goals, so that we can truly see the progress of those, especially when it comes to what are we doing at, like, I really want us to be as transparent as possible with our community, as what strategies are we doing to try to improve, the things here at our district. So whether it's academic achievement or safety or just community building. So I would really love for us to see that through these listening sessions, to come up with those specific goals that we have.
Board Member Greenberg, do you want anything, add anything?
I mean, we just talked about cell phones, so I would, add that as a conversation. Maybe that isn't necessarily something specific to our strategic plan, but maybe it is. I also, would want to hear more about our students. I know you had brought up students with learning disabilities and our students that are gifted. But also, other students that are receiving those special ed services. What do those families need? What kind of resources? How are they feeling about the services that we currently provide in the district? But then also looking at our English language learners and students in other marginalized groups to see how we can better support them as well. I would like to see, I would love as a group, maybe this would be in a study session or something. I'd love to review strategic plans just from neighboring districts, or maybe it could even be a district in another state, just to kind of get some ideas of where we want to go. I know as a teacher, when I've seen strategic plans, they're often very lengthy. And they don't necessarily seem tangible. In some settings that I've worked in, nobody ever talked to me about what the strategic plan was as a teacher, and it kind of felt like it was more at the administrative level. But really, like, our goals, like everybody here that works in the schools, our parents, our community, we're all part of that. And so we should all be aware of what is in the plan. And so I'd love to see for a strategic plan something maybe more streamlined. I love the idea of having SMART goals, but let's pick, a few things instead of trying to cover everything. I know, as many of you know in the room, sometimes you get 50 different initiatives and goals and plans and all these great things, and you're like, cool, all these sound great, but how am I going to do that? How am I going to have the time? And so I think we need to pick a few things and really do those things well.
Yeah, agree. I think in the M in SMART, the measurable, really, really important. I think we got some room to do to make sure we have measurable goals. On these really great questions, in terms of surveys, information that I would love to see is, especially if it's parents who are taking it, and there might be some different types depending on the audience and who's taking it, but you know, I'm thinking a lot about retention and enrollment and recruitment. So, you know, if it's a parent, why did you choose Osborne Schools? Would you recommend your to your neighbor, to your family, to your friend, you know, Osborne School? And oh, cell phone policy. We gotta implement that cell phone policy back there. Just kidding. Oh, it's a laptop. Anyway, I'm just kidding with you back there. I don't even know who that is, nor do I need to know. But you know, other things like, what are your future plans? We know there is a drop off from, you know, from kindergarten to eighth grade. We're losing some students, at least in the aggregate. So, you know, what are your future plans? Something, I don't know exactly how to word it, but something that gets to that. You know, you planning to. We want you here through everybody here through eighth grade. Is that your plan? Why? Why not? Something that can kind of shed some light on that, so we can work on that retention piece. I really like the second question about the focus groups, because I think a listening session brings in a certain audience, people who are kind of within, on some level, within our sphere already. Maybe they're, you know, they're fairly engaged, they're parents or whatever, or they're engaged in some way. But there's a whole different sphere of folks who are really important, who are community members, and maybe, you know, parents of little kids, you know, not yet school-aged kids, or prospective parents, people in our community. I really want to engage with those folks, and folks who don't have kids as well, who are, you know, I want to know what they think about our Osborne schools. Are they in the future going to send their future kids or nieces or nephews or whatnot to our schools? Why not? What are those perceptions? So I don't think you get that kind of group into a listening session, because they wouldn't really know, you know, or they wouldn't really maybe feel invited to do that because they're not parents. But I think through a focus group, we can kind of invite those folks, seek those kind of people out, invite them in, and kind of get their perspective as well, which will be really helpful. Anything else?
No, fantastic. I appreciate that, and I'm looking to activate this fall.
Oh, yeah.
You know, after you know, let's get to fall break. Let's get through our first parent teacher conferences, but that post October 15th time, starting a couple of these sessions, I think it'll be really important for you to be part of these. You know, not necessarily every single one, but you know, your presence at one or as many as you'd like to be a part of, and possibly, you know, helping me lead those
Absolutely.
sessions too. So
I would love that
yeah.
opportunity. Yep.
What if just thinking about what you were saying, Ed, it is hard sometimes to get, you know, we get like the same members of the community or the school or whatever that show up to things frequently, but we do want to, you know, hit other people. What if we looked at like doing some sort of like canvassing? And that could even be something that, you know, we look at having staff participate in too, like, you know, looking in.
Your November though.
Yeah, no.
Yeah, I think it's a great idea.
People will not want to talk to us like.
Yes, after November, but maybe that's a way to reach people that
Yeah.
we wouldn't normally be able to.
Great. All right. Well, we'll keep talking about this every meeting. Moving on to our reflections and feedback on the meeting. I'll start with Board Member Ford.
Thank you. I wanted to give a shout out to Brendan Stacy, our marketing and communications coordinator. I thought that the logo reveals on our social medias were so incredible. They were brilliantly executed. I loved the drone footage of all of our campuses. As a parent who has just one child in one school, it was incredible to see all of our schools. We have really beautiful campuses, and with the bond project, that's going to even beautify our campuses even more. I just think this is such a special place. I love this district. And Brendan, you revealed our logos and then also showed our community who we are and what our schools look like and what our schools are about. And I thought the launch of that was incredible. So thank you for doing that. I wanted to thank OEA for coming to our meeting today. As an OEA member, I'm not an OEA member, I don't work here, but I'm an AEA member. I'm part of the Classroom Teachers Association in the Phoenix Union High School District. As a fellow AEA member, you have my support, union solidarity always. When our certified and our classified staff feel represented and heard and valued, our students feel that. And that's who we want the impact to hit. Our students, when they have a teacher who enjoys their job and loves coming to work and feels supported, our students feel that. And so thank you for all the work you do representing the local here. And then just to the greater community, before the next meeting we'll have, the voter registration deadline will have passed, so encouraging anybody who is not registered to vote to register to vote. Early ballots will be in hands by the next meeting. So I just wanted to let our community know we're gonna have a really, really long ballot. They say 2 pages front and back. So for our community, please take the time to look at everything that is on our ballot. There are some really scary propositions on our ballot. There are some really great folks to vote for. And so I would just encourage our community to pay attention to their ballots and do your research and take your time with your ballot. And I hope everybody votes in November. Thank you.
Thank you, Board Member Ramos.
Yeah, I want to just say that I'm really grateful that OEA was able to be here and share with us information. As a former teacher who was also part of AEA, I truly appreciated that support, and I really hope that we get to hear from you all more often, as I think that we should be working as a partnership in getting that representation for what our staff needs. Thank you.
Board Member Greenberg.
As a fellow union member, thank you for presenting, and thank you for our district administration for also supporting OEA. I think that, it's really important that we're, all coming together for our kids. I really appreciate the conversations we're having around cell phones. It's an area that I think we really need to address, and it's a hard conversation to have. There are many different ways that you can approach it. So I look forward to having future discussions about that. And then I also wanted to thank my fellow board members for electing me as board clerk today. I'm excited to serve in that capacity.
It's wonderful. Congratulations. Echo everything that's been said. OEA, wonderful presentation, solidarity forever. Thank you so much for everything you guys do. And I really hope to continue to see you all flourish and grow and continue to do your good work for our teachers and staff. And big congrats to Corey on all the accolades, much deserved. Our school lunches, our breakfasts are wonderful. They're free. The parents in the district all know that. I think that's another thing we can continue to put out there. And so it's great to see you kind of get that recognition out on social media and push that out there. This past weekend, I asked my oldest daughter, I said, what's your favorite part of school? What's your favorite, I'm thinking she's going to say recess or PE. And she goes, lunch. And I go, what, lunch? I go, why lunch? She goes, I like eating. I'm like, fair enough. And I know she has a healthy lunch and breakfast every day, and that just helps her learning. So thank you so much for everything you do. Okay, Dr. Robert.
Thank you to the association for being here and sharing with us. And we've talked about kind of that process of going back and forth, and I really appreciate Storm highlighting that, that conversations have begun. Part of the reason the conversation didn't end is, that's an opportunity for her to go back and talk with her leadership and membership and make sure that she's representing all of those voices, and so the ongoing nature of our conversations, that's the way we do things here. So whatever procedures we come up with, we want them to be grounded in our values, and I think that we're off to a really good start in that. Thankful to Paul for sharing the work that we are engaged in with our bond, and we're gonna keep having him here regularly updating on all the work that there's a lot of exciting stuff coming up.
Yep. Absolutely. Moving on to future agenda items. Any future agenda items, Board Member Ford?
Speaking of the bond package, not a future agenda item, but I would like to get the bond information to our community. Our community, our community is who approved our bond. And so, as a thank you and a way of being transparent, my thoughts were to even just put like the presentation that we were presented with today on our website where our community can access it so they know where their tax dollars are being spent. I think that I drove by a school the other day and there was just a banner on their fence that said, "These are your bond dollars at work." And I was like, oh, that's brilliant. That's a really easy way to show the community where their tax dollars are going. And not necessarily, we don't need a banner. I don't think we need a banner, but at least to have the presentation on our website, I think would be really transparent and easy way to let our taxpayers know that we're using their money wisely. Thank you.
Great one. Board Member Ramos.
None for me at this time.
Board Member Greenberg.
I would just like to revisit the cell phone conversation at some point. I mean, we might want to get more information from our administration, so maybe that's our next step. And then I know we want to go out to the community too, but I'd love to hear more from our administration.
Great. And I just have one, and I don't know if this is a future agenda item or where to exactly put this, but it was last January or February when we passed the calendar we're in right now. We talked about setting up a calendar committee so we could pass next year's calendar a little earlier, as well as the following year's calendar. So really get out in front of it. And so would love to just get an update on the calendar committee, help with that in any way that I can, so we can kind of get that formed and get those recommendations and get those to our board to make a decision on earlier, and so our parents know the calendar. Okay, with that, our board meeting, the public portion is adjourned, or we are adjourned the public portion, and we're going to move into executive session. So we'll give a couple minutes for folks to filter out. So, and we'll come back for one last item on the. I expect to come back for one last item on the action items, item C, but that'll be after executive session. No one needs to stay until after that, unless you really, really want to. So have a good night, everybody.